Good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Woodbury County Zoning Commission. Today's date is January 17th, 2024. It is 5 p.m. Actually 5:03 p.m. Tonight's meeting will be audio taped and minutes will be prepared. In respect to all parties, we ask those present turn off cell phones or set to vibrate. Those in attendance are asked to legibly complete the attendance sheet upon the front table. I would like to take a moment to review the procedures that the commission will follow tonight. First, the commission will handle the normal housekeeping agenda items. Then for each application on the agenda, I will open the public hearing on the item. The planning and zoning staff will then present the staff report, including the staff recommendation. Any letters or other communication received from the public prior to the hearing will be entered into the record. The applicant will then have the opportunity to present his or her case and respond to staff report. Next, we will hear comments from the public. If you'd like to speak either in support of or against the application, you must come to the microphone. Please first state your name and address for the record. All interested parties shall be heard, but repetitious comments should be avoided. Repetitious or irrelevant comments may be ruled out of order by the chair. I ask that you remain respectful and courteous with your comments at all times. A limit of 3 minutes for each set of comments will be enforced. After all public comments have been heard, the staff and applicant may make a closing statement. The hearing shall then be closed by motion and vote. Thereafter, no further comments from the staff, public, or applicant may be heard unless asked for by the commission. The commission shall then deliberate the case and ask questions of the applicant, the staff, or any party offering testimony. However, such questions do not reopen the hearing for additional comments from the public unless so requested or approved by the commission. The commission will then formulate and vote on a motion. The motion will either typically grant or deny the requested application. Any commission member who has an ex parte communication to place in the record of this meeting should do so prior to the beginning of the deliberation of the respective agenda item. That being said, call to order, roll call is that all our commissioners are here, but one, Corey. Right? Corey Meister is absent. Okay, next item on the agenda then is item number 3, the election of the chair for zoning commission for 2024. We can't do anything about it if we don't have one. So we'll take nominations from the floor.
I will make a nomination that Chris Zumberzan continue as our chairman for the upcoming year, because you've done a lovely job.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a nomination and a second. Do we have any other nominations for the chair?
Would you want to discuss that?
Not really.
Okay.
Do you? Just moving on. Okay, so all in favor of the chair being Chris Zumberzan?
Do you have to vote also? Because it has to be 3, right? Correct?
We have 3,
Okay.
right?
All right.
Yes. A
Okay.
quorum. All right, so all in favor. Do you need roll call on that? Or no?
You can do that if you want.
Chairman?
John, keep track. Okay, all in favor of that motion or nomination to be chair?
Aye.
Okay. All opposed, same sign. Okay, I guess I did again. All right, the next item on the agenda is the election of the vice chair for zoning commission for 2024. Any nominations for that?
I'll make a motion. Mr. Tom Bright, continue as the vice chair coming here because you've done such a lovely job.
Okay, we have a motion and I'll second that. Jeff wants to second that. Jeff wants to second that. Okay, so any further discussions or any other nominations? I'm hearing none. All in favor of that nomination, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Congratulations, Tom.
Just show up to the meeting.
Yep. Acceptance speech.
Yep.
Okay, and item number 5 on the agenda is public comment on matters not on the agenda. Do you have any public comment on matters not on the agenda? I'm hearing none. We will go forward on item number 6, which is the work session for proposed utility scale solar energy systems zoning ordinance amendment summary. Dan, do you want to read that information into the record for us, please?
Yes, again, tonight's meeting is a work session for the continuation of the debate that has been presented to us by the Board of Supervisors concerning an option to look at proposals to address solar energy policy in the unincorporated areas of Woodbury County. It's important to point out that the current policy in place is for the permitting of industrial assets, in particular solar panels for industrial uses are geared toward the general industrial zoning district in Woodbury County. If there was an applicant at this time for these type of projects, the eligible area would be in that industrial area, which is predominantly south of the airport, Sioux Gateway Airport, and west of Interstate 29 in that respective area. So at this point, that's the only areas where utility solar could be considered. The Board of Supervisors have asked the commission to look at this in terms of permitting it in other locations, such as the agricultural preservation zoning district. And over the course of several months and a series of meetings, we've collected input from many landowners and various others that have opinions on all different sides of the issue. We've looked at a good amount of literature. We've consulted with comprehensive plans and presented a few options for consideration. One of the options is to transfer this debate as part of the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is at the 11th hour, meaning it's pretty much in place. Input has been collected and information is ready. In fact, we will have a public hearing on Monday to kind of present where we are at with the comprehensive plan in nature. However, the comprehensive plan remains open to discussion for the priorities of the mapping throughout unincorporated Woodbury County. And that kind of leads to the other proposals, such as an overlay district, which would be kind of considering a particular area over ag land with a set of parameters that could possibly open up the ability to permit over ag land if certain criteria is met. That's included within the backup materials. And the other option is to retain the current policy and revise the conditional use permit process. The overlay district is geared toward involving the zoning commission and the Board of Supervisors in terms of the level of permitting. As far as the current policy, that involves the zoning commission and the Board of Adjustment. The retention of the current policy with added features would entail adding additional ordinance language with protections such as agreements, decommissioning, etc. Where we had left off in the last public hearing was to push this out to tonight's meeting, January, to have us have a chance to, of course, collect more public input, more concepts to be introduced into the record. Those were put into the backup materials included with the packet. Additionally, the only other major item that I had received since the last meeting was a citizen comment from Naomi Widman. And I asked that the zoning commission receive this into the record for the minutes, which would require, of course, a motion in a second, but this general comments from the public. And so,
Do you want to do that now?
yeah, I think it'd be a good idea.
I'll make a motion that we accept those.
Okay, the motion, can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say the sign. Okay.
Okay, with everything that I've said, which is of course a broad viewpoint, this is a very significant consequential debate on the future of Woodbury County. I've reached out to the local jurisdictions, the cities, et cetera, and have definitely asked for them to offer input on the potential effects with their respective communities. I have not received a lot of input back at this point, but there's definitely lots of considerations that you could keep in mind for the ordinance as far as respect for the local jurisdictions. With that said, the three concepts are laid out within there, and so I would basically turn it back to the board and kind of ask that we kind of look through at least those three possible options, and so we can all better acquaint ourselves with kind of the details that are before us in a conversational format.
Dan, has there been any previous applications for a conditional use permit for this use?
Yes, Mid-American Energy a couple of years ago, down by Port Neal Road on the corner, near their campus, about a 73 acre or so parcel, located a solar site down there. They went through the protocols that the county has at the time for the conditional use, for notifying the neighbors. Actually, a notification under the current rules are 500 feet within the property and that are notified by letter. Everything's published in the legal section, and the zoning commission scrutinized the site plan, the respective locations where they're going to be on the parcel, and looked at potential effects that it could have on the area. We consulted with a number of area agencies, including the FAA, considering the location there of the airport, and took a lot of information into consideration through our typical conditional use funnel as we try to investigate all the different aspects of that. And it was turned over to the Board of Adjustment. Our system is designed where the commission conducts a review meeting, and the public hearing is held at the Board of Adjustment level. So the commission kind of does the homework as far as where the shortfalls and the positives, negatives, all of those are. Transfer that over to the Board of Adjustment, and the Board of Adjustment has that information available as well as the public input at hand. And so that information is funneled in, and they make a determination on how to write their resolution and the standards for permitting that respective project. So that is the one and only project that I'm aware of since my tenure.
And
so
no pending applications?
No pending.
Was there a decommission plan with that site?
I don't believe so.
Okay,
And that's why part of the proposal is to have direct language in there specific to decommissioning.
any other companies that have approached the county at all for anything in the general industrial area?
We, once in a while, we get inquiries, of course, but as far as actually permitting and selecting that as a site location, no.
And that's 11,000 acres.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of, there's been stuff talked about that it doesn't pay what it would deem necessary to acquire that ground, is what I've heard.
Because of the infrastructure?
The general industrial businesses will pay more than the
And
solar
the solar
pays.
panels.
So, I mean, that's just a couple comments that I've had made to me.
And then Mid-America, that they owned that 73 acres. That was
Yeah,
leased.
that was their private property.
Yeah. Okay, so, I mean, if we start at the comprehensive plan debate, which is number one, just a couple of things that I saw that I highlighted that I thought were significant was even in the 2005 comprehensive plan, we for policy 2.5 states fully explore alternative renewable energy sources. No, I don't think that's really a debate. I think that's something that is still exists today, but I mean, what is everybody else's thoughts? Renewable energy is here to stay.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think that's back then and now, and more so now.
And I think so into the future, from what I can understand. I mean, I'm looking at articles that are portraying 2050. That renewable energy is just going to expand. Maybe not to the extent that they think it is, but, and that's something else I found. They still said coal, oil, natural gas is going to be our primary energy sources.
Well, and that's even the guy from Mid-America, and that was his comment. It's more of a mix than a one source.
One source situation, right?
If I may, in the lit review references, this has been kind of a federal initiative. The administration has put forward a priority as far as introducing the local communities to renewable initiatives. And there's been priorities 2035, which was referenced in there. And I know that they've been carefully watching the communities. There's been meetings. There was a meeting last Friday from the Department of Agriculture as well as the Department of Energy that was kind of assessing where the local communities are, what kind of potential positives and negatives there are as far as the permitting and trying to understand where communities are. Well, with the different aspects of addressing it. And as we're kind of coincides with the lit review, many communities, there's not one size fits all in terms of addressing these respective issues. Some communities do it by conditional use permits. Some do it by all out allowed use by certain areas. And some have employed the overlay district scenario, which is of course heavily referenced with Lynn and Scott County. Even though those two are overlay, they significantly do it much different, as one relies much more on suitability rating while the other has more of that rubric aspect. But the point I'm making is this is part of the economy or the future economy as far as renewable being a part of it. And there's a compelling interest at the federal level asking communities to look at this as part of the land use measures. And as we know, a lot of times these unincorporated areas have age development plans that are not up to where these future standards are. And if you're looking at particular areas or priorities across the board for the county to recognize these type of land uses, it's more than appropriate to look at the development plan as a way to prioritize what the initiatives are and where you want to put these assets. Just you look at the history of Woodbury County and the nature of our population. And as Simcoe has worked towards this current draft of the development plan, we found a lot of similarities from 2005 as far as the priorities of where we locate our industrial base is where we have the priority on agriculture. And the zoning ordinance that grew out of that 2005 plan put the emphasis much on the agricultural area, or excuse me, the industrial areas, and kept it off of the agricultural land at that time. Lots of the debates have been in Woodbury County about whether you take the farmland out of production. We've also had quite a bit of debates on protection of Los Hills, and we've ran into a number of issues as far as the interpretation of landowner rights. However, development plans are put in place on purpose so that we can have a moment to stop and look and see the innovations of how the world has changed in a lot of respects, and go back and poll the public so that the public understands and has the ability to present to the leadership on what type of community that we want to be. And that's why we label these. That's why we say 2040, we're projecting forward. And as technology grows, we're kind of here at a juncture. These solar assets can definitely take up a significant footprint. And so it does offer us the question, we have quite a bit of ag land out there. Are there areas that might be suitable to facilitate the permitting of this growing technology? It's imperative to point out that we have a lot of significant uses that can definitely play affect a footprint on agricultural land that are conditional use permitted. However, the most distinguishing factor is that solar can take up a lot more acres than any other use that is presented in our zoning ordinance. They could probably go from 500 acres up to 2,500, 3,000 some acres of agricultural land that could be debated within there. And I think that's important as the community decides if this is a fit for how Woodbury County wants to be. In that meeting that I attended, it was a Zoom meeting. They talked about nationwide kind of affecting less than 2% of ag land, or about 1%, kind of spreading it out as addressing some of the alternative energy priorities to address the grid in the future. And they pointed out quite a bit in their presentation about coexistence, agrivoltaics, things that we've talked about in some of the previous meetings, where that technology continues to be studied on whether it can go further than sheep grazing, whether it could coexist with crops, et cetera. But that's kind of a growing thing to look at, as well as the compatibility, and the literature definitely says in the proponents of adding this to ag land see it as compatible, depending on how the farmer wants to prioritize their farm operation with this. So the literature definitely kind of goes across the board talking about land values. It's tough there's various studies out there from Texas, Rhode Island, Massachusetts that are placed into the kind of direct comparison. Woodbury County is unique. We're definitely not Rhode Island, but we can definitely learn something. Some of the data says that within a half mile, it could affect land values at 1.5%, but then you're talking about housing. And so I cannot consciously take that data and 100% apply it, or even attempt to apply it to our situation, but it's definitely helpful to understanding the perception. This is a lot of assessment is based on perception, how people feel. There's some that might really value the renewable aspect and see it as a gain as far as having it in your community and actually positively affecting. We've seen that in some of the literature. We've seen that some that have strongly oppose it because it couldn't adversely affect things such as viewscape, quality of life, et cetera. So what we find is there's a significant level of opinions on the aspect on how it affects ground zero, meaning your own backyard, your own respective community. And I think that's why, I know that's why we've spent so much time trying to carefully consider what is an appropriate fit or not. And going back to the previous determination, the citizens of Woodbury County placed those in the industrial, basically labeling them an industrial type of activity. And that's pretty much where the plan is. And that's why we put so much emphasis on the development plan, as looking at, does that remain our priority, or is there an openness to expanding out? And if you're going to expand out, the development plan could either back an overlay district, or even back the concept of not necessarily spot zoning, where you can maybe address areas that are suitable and prioritized for a type of general industrial development, or even reworking the limited industrial kind of concept as well. Then we would have to look at the law of unintended consequences. You fix something some way, then all of a sudden, what did you end up doing the other way? As far as if you make something industrial, but there's a desire to continue agriculture, do you handle that with the overlay district, or do you adjust and allow farming in limited industrial? And the grandfathering rights, or legal non-conforming rights, I should say, that are applied in our current industrial area mean that the farmers can basically continue fully with their operation until that use ceases to exist after a set period of time. And so if you were to flip a district and allow something maybe in a limited industrial, do you address it for long-term farming, or do you have a grandfathering type of scenario. So the question is, how do you look at each unique location? And I think the fallacy that I've ran into as staff throughout this whole debate is I haven't had any direct target locations, which is very helpful for understanding the priority of the county. And so when we talk about the future development map and looking at it as a debate as far as development planning, I think it would be helpful to kind of know where are some alternative areas, if not industrial, that could be presented to us so that we could understand if it might be a priority. And that goes beyond the CSR and the various other indicators that we're talking about, because we had the question in our last work session, what about the CSR on industrial land? Well, you're already in industrial land and it's already a permitted use or conditional use. So you're not talking about those aspects once you're inside of the industrial land. So if you decide up front and you have the information before you up front on if something's going to be a future industrial area, you plan for it ahead of time, you lay that out as the priority, then you're not debating CSR and those type of things. The public comes together as far as an area that they all find appropriate. So those are some of the, I think, the challenges, and that's why this is strung out so long, is the debate has been more of we're looking at all these options, but we don't have, okay, this proposal, this proposal, this proposal. When you have a set of proposals or priorities, it shows transparency as far as, okay, that might work, that might not work. And so that's why development plan is an option here.
So I might be going beyond tonight's meeting and going into the next meeting that we have on the comprehensive plan. There wasn't a lot of feedback from the community, from the public, as far as what they saw in the comprehensive plan at the time when Simcoe was developing everything.
Specific to the whole plan or to solar?
To solar.
Solar policy, there was not a lot. There was actually no major submissions that I got. I would have to touch base with Aaron more further as far as the solar policy, but the meetings that I've been at, they were not, I wish they were more attended, in fact, as well, that solar was never that, shining priority at the time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we talk about solar kind of as a whole with the renewable energy sources, but I know that includes wind, but that's off the, that's off the table. I don't want to include that, but I mean, there wasn't a lot of pushback or a lot of concern about that terminology or language in this proposed new comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
So, that kind of surprises me a little bit too, but then we don't hear things until we have a problem and then we hear funny.
That's the one thing as a college instructor, when I'm teaching the students, we'd oftentimes talk about proactive policy versus the reactive policy. And you can't get more proactive than a development plan. You're basically asking the community, what kind of community do you want to be over the long run? And that's the opportunity to chime in and show us. But most policy is reactive. Eventually, and we do, and that's fine. And that's definitely a big part of it. But this is one of the most wonderful opportunities that any community has to collect on the priorities, because it's the hope that there's some sort of unity as far as the priorities as much as possible.
And the other thing that I see, even in this map versus the proposed map, there isn't a lot of change. But I see around a lot of the towns, there's transitional agriculture, and solar could potentially feed into those towns. And I mean, we're talking transmission lines. And it sounds like that's where the solar wants to be, is near transmission line. We don't know where those are. We don't know the key information about, okay, where are they? So we can plan around this. Where is this going to happen? It sounds like they want to be within a half mile of.
Yeah, it's what I've been told is, common sense and practicality is you need to be near where the energy is. So substations or the transmission lines, the literature definitely backs that up. And so, you can generally understand where a lot of those assets are, but it's, in order to have a priority, to have a layout on what the expectations are, the community would have to come to some type of consensus through mapping on where there might be some reasonable priority areas. And that's a good point, though. Energy assets are something that should be definitely considered as part of those locations.
Right, and we've gotten no information from the communities in Woodbury County as far as their interest in renewable energy.
Well, the communities, as far as the development plan, have been consulted and looked at as far as their development plans. When Aaron and Corrine have worked on putting this together, one of the first things they looked at was the city's future land use maps, because we want full out compatibility. We
Right.
never want to run into any kind of conflict based on the land use. There's got to be full out agreements as far as and you look at even our normal regular order and how we handle subdivisions. The 2 mile is taken very seriously. We work with Sioux City on that quite a bit with the subdivisions and the other community. When we revisited the wind debate, one of the things that came up was 2 mile setback. And so 2 mile setback was brought in there, not because it was not actually not associated with wind policy or even a section in Iowa code, but we went back to the tradition of understanding that 2 mile territory as far as subdivision and other zoning scenarios where cities actually, if your county does not have zoning, the city still has a compelling interest in Iowa code within the 2 mile range there. So yes, the cities have been respected through the development.
Right, but have they even said that this is what we're trying to plan? We might be planning this in this area too, or we're interested in this. So this ag land that's transitional, we're looking at this for the potential that this might be. So that helps us plan overall.
Yeah, specifically in running these proposals out, and right now we're talking in hypotheticals. So the cities have basically received information. How do you feel about solar policy being that general? And that's the fallacy in the debate, is we don't have a specific target area. So if you're talking about an entire district, whether it's AP, the citizen or the community leader, we're all left with, okay, it's possible, but we don't know, because it gets project specific. And that's definitely the challenge from that, chasing a policy without a direct mapping. And so if we get into the ordinance and we start talking about ag areas or these other areas, we can still discuss setbacks or discuss ways that we can protect the cities and their rights within those areas and their priorities for sure.
So we're talking about 427,000 acres of ag land, AP. And yet we're supposed to figure out where these solar things are supposed to fit and work with maybe a conditional use or whatever it happens to be, without knowledge of what the cities are thinking or those transmission lines. We can narrow the field by using our 2 mile setbacks. We can use up some by our CSRs that eliminate some of the land. The slope that can eliminate some more of the land. So that narrows the field a little bit, but is that going to be enough? Are those the issues that we want to?
Well, the issue is, if you're looking at an ordinance, if you're looking at the overlay specifically where you're trying to facilitate it on agricultural land, you need to know the priorities of what the regulations are. You owe it to developers, you owe it to landowners, you owe it to the public that there's a clear, transparent process that they can go through and have an expectation to meet the permitting requirements. By the time they work through the ordinance, they work through staff, they work through other leaders, most proposals should be in shape to be feasible. Typically, when somebody calls the zoning office and they expect you in a sense to have an understanding. I know number one thing we say, we can't speak for board members, we can't speak for appointed or elected officials, but we can certainly show them a process that has been put into place by the community that is clear and makes, hopefully makes sense to everybody, whether it's a clear setback, you can be this far away, whether it's a soil standard, having specific regulations built in there to the point we get into the larger scale of how other communities have addressed this. I've seen acre caps, I've seen megawatt caps, but if you were to even put an acre cap on and you still have the whole level of agricultural available, that still leaves the uncertainty as far as where these could be sited. And so going down to, I know one of the communities puts an acre cap in, and where the supervisors would probably have to, because it's an ordinance, they'd have to go revisit the acre cap if something were to ever change, and actually debate it through the 3 typical public hearings on whether an acre cap should be at a certain level.
And that's out of 14 counties that actually have some kind of zoning regulations for this out of all of the state of Iowa.
And as you can tell through the sample counties that were presented in the report, there's a mix, but a lot of them do rely on the conditional use.
Or
The,
some kind of special use permitting.
we discussed a little bit on size, the Port Neal plants, they're about a 500 megawatt each. That 500 megawatt would equate to somewhere between 500 to 1,000 acre site for solar, depending on how it's done.
More than that, I think your literature
Isn't it?
mentioned 5 to 10 acre per megawatt.
It's
So
quite a
it's
I thought-
more like,
I thought that the what was the
Yeah, there was a 5 to 10.
800 acre, 500 megawatt site that Mid-America or somebody currently has in Iowa?
That's it by Fort Dodge. Is
Yeah,
that the
that,
one?
I'm trying to think of this.
I can't remember the name.
And I
but
thought that was a 500 megawatt site and it was 800 acres.
Mhm.
This says 10 acres to produce 1 megawatt on page 5.
I don't know where the difference would come into play on.
It roughly gives you an idea how many acres per a project, if they're going for a certain amount of megawatts, could take out of ag land or coexist with it.
Where'd you find the
No,
information in here?
Yeah.
There's a lot.
But am I incorrect then on that site? That's currently a 500 megawatt site with 800 acres?
Have to probably go back and look at, that came out of the work session.
Yeah, that was in one of the,
So,
It would have been.
I think that was a question I asked, what the largest one was in, yeah,
Iowa.
800 acre, oh, that's 100 megawatt.
What
So-
page are you on, Tom?
8.
Yep. 8 acres for,
So that fits within that ballpark.
Okay. but is that the largest one currently in the state of Iowa? Holiday Creek project.
Have to look back at
Okay.
the transcript.
So yeah, I mean, you'd be, and that's where the cap, I can't remember what, it was around 8,000 some acres was the supervisors when we discussed that to start with.
Yeah, they had the percentage.
1,540, it's 2%.
Okay.
I think we talked about that was even too much.
So
At one point in
that
time.
would allow for two sites to, if they were full 500 megawatt sites.
Maybe 3, if you get 2,500 acre apiece, 3 plus, right?
What's that? It'd be 4,000 acres for a
Right, okay.
500 megawatt
Doing the math,
site.
okay.
So if they were to say, we're gonna replace this plant, which it wasn't, well, what, I can't think of the Mid-Americans will, he said that's not what the plan would be. And,
But
I mean, even so, you'd have 2 sites would meet the cap. If they replaced every, or the whole capacity that Mid-American currently would have on 2 plant, or 2, was it south? Which ones are running?
South and.
There's two, right? Yeah.
the two
So,
sites.
but he said that the coal is gonna still be part of the picture and
Mhm.
it's not gonna be taken over by solar.
Right.
I mean, I think the 2% cap, I guess what I'm saying is would probably allow enough acres to cover what's gonna be needed in the short term, 20 years or whatever. Maybe that'll change down the road.
Do we want to commit to something like that over 20 years, or do we want to review that like they have down here in the industrial area? They're going to review it. They want to review it every 4 years.
And that's the other thing too, is if it's left that, hey, just put it in the general industrial, there's 11,000
Mhm.
acres.
10,000 acres.
So you could eat up a big chunk of that if somebody were to put that in there.
Mhm.
So then the other answer is, do you expand general industrial? But then where do you put it? How do you expand that? And if you take away the ability to put it elsewhere outside of general industrial, if you stay with what we currently have, and that's the only spot for it, is it even gonna be feasible?
Well,
I mean, if nothing's went there now, nobody's looking at the general industrial site that you're aware of for,
and hasn't
solar,
for how
and
many-
hasn't.
and hasn't for how many years?
I mean, so I guess it's either. The way I look at it is right now, general industrial doesn't work for solar to the landowner because they don't get the money that they want to get out of it that they can potentially get for general industrial use other than solar. I mean, I guess I'm thinking the reason why it hasn't gone there yet. And like I said, I've had a couple individuals say, I'm not gonna take that payment because it's worth this much. It isn't enough.
But it didn't sound like Mid-American was really even a player as
What's
far
that?
as the solar goes. I got the indication that.
Well,
they're really a player either.
There's, the options that are being bought right now are, I'm assuming, not Mid-American purchasing them.
Yeah, that's what I'm
I
guessing.
don't know. We don't know those answers, but, somebody's out there looking, somebody's got options on ground,
Planned. Mhm.
but none of those are within the general industrial currently. So I'm assuming either they looked and they realized it was too costly, or
They're
they just
hoping.
didn't look there. I don't know what the answer is on
Mhm.
that, but right now our plan only allows for it in that area. So I would think that they would have at least looked there
Looked
to
at that
start
area.
with,
Right.
unless there's a different reason that I'm not seeing why it doesn't work in the general industrial.
Well, I think we gotta be careful with hypotheticals and
Well-
what folks might envision. I do think that the literature speaks to the fact that they're looking for the most feasible locations. They're not nationwide, probably. When this kind of comes from, a nationwide priority, and you have developers finding it very lucrative to get into industrial solar. And they're gonna look at various factors on where the most suitable locations are. Of course, zoning would likely be a factor, but you're gonna always try to find the path of least resistance. I'm sure they would love to line up the zoning perfectly, but there's times that you gotta tell the local community that we've got this, this endeavor here that might be lucrative, and your zoning may not fit up exactly right. And so the burden is on them to demonstrate to the community on how this will fit with that area. And that's really what a rezone application does, is it shows the very public way on whether that this is a suitable priority. And going back through normal order and development plans and mapping, all of those things can be helpful to backing up a particular project. But I think there's a number of reasons why or why not folks may have considered an industrial area, not an industrial area. There's, on the other hand, folks will argue that industrial areas are not a good location because you might take other economic activity that could be placed in the industrial area that solar may not do so well for.
Well, and
And I know
that
that-
activity won't fit anywhere else, but it would fit there, and the economic gain is gonna be high. And I guess the other thing, when Chris was talking about, transmission lines, those, we can't. It's a federal regulation. We can't put a map out there with them drawn through and say, oh, these are the areas in Woodbury County that we should be looking at, because you can't do that. So that makes it.
It was that,
Well, they know where they are, but we can't put together that map and put it in our plan and say, well, here's these, correct?
Yeah,
That-
a lot of the utility asset things, there's knowledge of them, obviously.
We-
for the
we-
Planning group.
People know where they are, but we can't put that map in our
Public.
plan, in our
Okay,
public
public.
map.
You're not gonna get down to specific
And
footprint.
then, and then go out and say, okay, here's an area that's, there's transmission lines through here. This is suitable. This is an area we would.
But I do think if you're a developer and you're looking at, the key assets and why you want a project in a certain spot, that's gonna catch your eye and you're gonna definitely go for it. And that might very well be the case on why there's some areas out there. I'm just saying, kind of through the planning process, without having a good grasp on what those areas are, you can always track options, like, but with the recorder's office, you can generally understand where those options are, as reflected in the packet at certain points, but not knowing the full scope makes it much more challenging as far as the priority of which lands that you take out. And this debate is very much centered in on, does ag land go in, does ag land go out? We're concerned about corn suitability rating. We know that it's heavily went into the debate of CSR1, CSR2, et cetera. But which CSR2 is, of course, the current metric across the board from assessment. But like with Scott County basically says we're using the CSR2. But when you do use the CSR2, it does limit, depending on the quality of the soil, limits those available acres. And so that's where this is kind of goes back and forth. And again, if we had a better understanding on what some of these particular areas are, it would definitely be helpful for the planning process. It's sort of like the theory, you get a rezone application. We all know what happens with that. You get a rezone application, we bring it in, do they meet the criteria? We look down the criteria, and I know the first thing that we run to right away is that a spot zone. We run into the spot zone, and that's what's kind of hindered the process right now from the developer standpoint. Because they know they could submit an application, it could come to you tomorrow. They go through and then they'd run into that criteria. They'd have the CSR to look at, but then they would have the spot zone to look at. And the commission, depending on the facts that you glean out of all the proceedings and everything, might recommend to the Board of Supervisors, that's a nice project and everything, but it just does not fit with the letter of the law right now within the ordinance. And so you make that recommendation to them, and that's the overall effect. And so you go back to looking at this process. The question is, how do you address those matrix for whether the area of land, that footprint, is suitable or not? And because it's on ag land, that's why we're in the midst of this. The overlay is a way of your original recommendation to the supervisors back in May and June was to go the conditional use route. And I think that the commission at that time really highlighted, you look at the area, you scrutinize the area, you look at the application, you look at the surroundings, you run it through each of the criteria, you come up with a determination, and then you send that over to the Board of Adjustment. I know you're very well versed and used to doing that. And that was a result of the recommendation. It's sort of like when you go to the overlay, how do you replicate that in a sense, but involve the supervisors with some type of criteria? And you'll see in the proposed option there in the packet, there's sort of some red ink in there that kind of highlights the similar process that you do for the conditional use on scrutinizing the area. Some of that scorecard that Lynn has adopted is in there to kind of mitigate some effects, but it sort of amplifies the conditional use process in a sense. I kind of call it a super conditional use because it involves the supervisors, but and involves the public hearing proceedings and everything at maximum level with the three and then the zoning commission. But, it's like, if you're gonna go with a solar policy or a solar proposal, you need those clear goalposts on what constitutes that area as being acceptable or not. It's just that if you run that through the existing right now on ag land to switch it to industrial, I mean, that's what we would do right now to try to facilitate it. Staff would tell them, you know, that's not suitable because there's a C in the column. And so they could try for the rezone and then run the application here and then maybe run into that brick wall because of that criteria. So,
In your overlay option, and I apologize if these questions have been answered. This is my first meeting, so trying to get caught up to speed on all the work that you guys have put into this. But on the overlay option, have you looked at limiting that overlay in the other zoning districts? Have you said the overlay is allowed in AP, GI, LI, or have you looked at those additional parameters of limiting it elsewhere?
yeah, so the overlay could be conditioned for only a specific zoning district. So you could say that it's only eligible on AP land. And some counties, some jurisdictions have actually put setbacks from the overlay from other zoning designations as well to kind of create a buffer in there from it. But yes, the way that it's kind of presented in here is the overlay becomes an ordinance option. And it gets confusing sometimes. When you say you're creating an overlay district, I think the public might think that you're laying a district over top of the map right away when it's approved. But what it is it's an available tool that the county has, the commission, the supervisors have to approve an area where you're virtually creating the overlay for the project footprint. So that district is being created at the time to facilitate that project on that respective district. So yeah, you could say, no, it can't go nowhere near suburban residential. It can't go near agricultural estates. If you even went that far, agricultural estates is our most dense district in terms of the 2-acre lots and density, land densities. So that's really kind of how the overlay can be used. And in a sense, it has the feeling of a conditional use because you're dealing with a footprint of land on a conditional use as well. But as far as a zoning overlay district, we would end up with a legal description basically defining what this new overlay district is. And we have all kinds of overlay districts out there. We do have a pre-existing one, which is the floodplain. It sits out there. It is a functional district that coincides. It's just that we create a recognized area for an additional use that's created to innovate that is not allowed underneath the base district, basically. And the overlay has a bit more flexibility than a standalone zoning district because if you go and rezone to general industrial the way it's written right now, or limited industrial, you're going specific to that use and any use that's available within that district, which can create other concerns, the law of unintended consequences. But the overlay could be geared toward, okay, here is this use. And but you retain your full agricultural rights and everything that the rights and privileges of agricultural preservation underneath. And so that's definitely I think the compatibility that Scott and Lynn County have seen as far as their proposals. And it's a smart planning type of principle to, if you're going to go into overlay, is to, again, go into the development plan and maybe reference those type of concepts so that there's something to hang the hat on as far as a policy and the use of those things. And this is something that would be very new to Woodbury County. We don't have we have language in there for overlays for conservation and other uses, but they haven't been actively employed or rezoned to. And so it's not a regular process for us.
And the other thing that could or would limit is if there was a cap.
Mhm.
and you have that too, you know, if it's X acres. That's really the only way you can limit because you don't know where it's gonna go or where people are gonna wanna put it in AP. So you just have to limit the acres, and once that caps it, then that's it.
Yeah,
And
and
once the use is done, like your lease or your contract is up, the overlay disappears and you're back to ag. And this,
You
know,
wouldn't change that,
you would
that
change the
zoning
base.
classification for
Right.
that property and end up with this general industrial out in the middle
Right,
of.
the spot zoning that we're
Yeah.
trying to stay away from.
and it depends on how you word the overlay ultimately in the ordinance, what the rights and privileges are of the overlay, what the decommissioning situation is, when the use stops, what are the expectations there, for that respective district. We've got our county-wide regulations on things, but if you're gonna get specific, you're gonna want the overlay to cover a lot of those options. And, again, I would, my recommendation would be everything that is considered, we immediately go to the law of unintended consequences, because this is one of those things right away that you make one adjustment here and you may not realize, oh, we're affecting it over here. So we've got to be very, very careful as far as how those could be if an overlay is something that's desired for recommendation.
So condition wise, I know we've talked about condition. We already had flood zone or the flood zone. That's kind of a condition that we use. Typically, we've talked about CSRs. They have an impact on what we approve and what we don't approve as a condition. In my reading, I've read that they're looking for areas within a half mile of transmission lines, and so do we make that one of our conditions? I mean, that narrows the field that much more. I mean, I don't want to be too restrictive, but you lose 5% in the transmission lines as it is of solar, and solar's already 20% efficient. So it's like we're kind of playing with their rules. Ideal rules, maybe a little bit.
Again, it kind of comes down to generally mapping. I think
Mhm.
that's definitely kind of a very helpful ideal as far as placement. I do think that, there's land out there that may very well fit some criteria that we're looking for. And I think that there's industry standards where they want to be located. And I'd like to know much more from the developer side, what is your ultimate goal on these spots? Why would you seek out certain areas, certain landowners and see that be the prime ground on putting it at that location? I think that's helpful. I think the more that becomes transparent, I think that makes their process even more smooth nationwide, other counties, because it gives a sense of understanding on what folks are looking for.
But on the flip side, that can be used against them. So, so I can see where they're trying to protect
Yeah.
that information.
Competition.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess to answer your question is putting the restriction on the distance for a transmission line. I think they're gonna do what they're gonna do that's gonna work better for them.
Or
So,
absolutely.
and if it is the case that their half mile is their limit or unless they put in,
Their ideal standard or
More,
whatever.
a different transmission line, I think that'll fix itself for that, just that part of it. I mean,
Right.
they're gonna go where it's gonna work best.
Right.
And to say, well, that has to be within a half mile of that. I don't know that that's,
Necessarily has to be put in writing.
I guess I don't know what that's gonna fix.
Okay.
Because it still might be in an area where people don't, the neighbor don't
Not gonna
want that
want it.
anyhow.
Right.
If they're within that half mile, but if they're outside the half mile, maybe the people are fine there and they can go a little further. I don't know.
I would probably suggest to you all more scrutiny on separation distances. Those are more of the feasibility things. I think that the public has a greater understanding for, they know how far they want to be away from things that are affected in their neighborhood. We've seen a number of debates that come down directly to setbacks and separation distances. We've seen the Center of Rural Affairs offer us different ranges from 200 to 300. There's some of the most counties that have had on the far end have used 1,000-foot setbacks specific to residential. I think if we're going to start kind of parsing specifically each area, we're going to want to look at how far do they need to be from a single family dwelling, a house? How far do they need to be from the corporate line, from the cities? The cities offer us more detail on that if they're in support of that or not. That'd be helpful. Looking at the wind ordinance that we did, we had, I think, airport separation distances. There was separation distances from cemeteries, from conservation areas. And I know that speaking of setbacks, the Conservation Board did send us, it was in the back of the packet, a recommendation of a mile setback from the respective conservation areas. So there are groups out there that want to have input on how far away they are from things. And I think that could be helpful to the debate as well on when you know that, okay, I can only be so far away from these respective points. That offers us a bit more clarity as far as citing where these can be as well. So I do think that the debate should discuss if an overlay or if another form is adopted, that we need to go into each one of those setbacks specifically and decide which ones are the most appropriate. Because setbacks are a mechanism used to try to create compatibility. That's the whole goal of a setback, is to try to, give you the ability to be there and give you the ability to not be so impacted generally. So.
Well, it offers the protection for the people who are already there that.
Yeah. But the Center of Rural Affairs definitely offers some that they promote as being reasonable. And some may say they're not reasonable. And I just want to highlight both ends of the debate because we've definitely seen that.
One issue I see on the overlay is, and it can be fixed with the parameters that are established as part of that ordinance amendment, but is setting the timing of the installation of the solar panels, because I think it would come down to an issue where you may have vendors apply for an overlay to get to the cap, whatever that cap may be established, and then it never gets built for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it may be. I think a discussion needs to be had in those parameters that if you request that overlay, it goes through the appropriate process, it's approved, and you have X amount of days, whether it's 365 days, 2 years, whatever it may be, and then it becomes null and void.
Mm-hmm.
To release that cap, if that's the direction from the Board of Supervisors, is to have an established cap, because I can see someone just coming in and grabbing.
Tying
the
up
entire
everything.
cap.
So it has to be connected with the development.
Yeah.
And that could be tied into also the, like a permit, you have X time, and if you don't start,
Mhm.
then you gotta start the process over again.
But
And
you,
that's a good idea, so that somebody can't just
Tie it all.
lock it all up and say, oh, there's nothing else available, we got it,
and that you want that enumerated along with this versus relying on the building permits.
Yes.
Good point.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing that in any of the other development criteria that we went through.
I think I crossed it on one of them.
Did you? 14, like 14 of our,
jot that down, make sure it's in there.
Yeah.
yeah. A lot of other stuff, but. Project timeline,
Yeah, that was,
page 83.
Whose is that?
Who did we use? Lynn
83.
County? For a lot of the criteria that's in here is
significant part
probably,
would be then, yeah.
yeah, a combination of the counties that have a policy or haven't, this was an overlay district utility scale system has their policy in place. Project timeline is 6A.
Yeah, that's within the proposed overlay language.
Mhm.
And what I'm thinking is you actually set start time. You don't allow for the flex, you don't allow them to set their time. I mean, as part of their application, hey, we expect to have this constructed within X amount of months. And then if it's not, then
But we can hold them to that too. I mean, without it actually being in writing, we can say, okay, as part of your application, you have to start it on that day. And
I
then,
think it could be done as part of the actual
Overlay, that's the condition that when they
apply
apply, that's,
the overlay.
it's 12 months. And if you haven't, I don't know. if
I would say
you-
upon approval.
Or, upon
Okay,
approval, and then
okay.
and then I guess you probably have to set, if you haven't started by this date,
Mhm.
then this goes back to
Then they
Right.
can
AP
reply.
and you have to start over again.
Yeah,
You lose.
And it'll still stay AP, just the overlay.
Right. I mean, it
Right.
goes back, it loses the overlay.
Yep.
And you're back with,
Yeah.
so that's pretty important that something like that's put in if that's the route that's. And I mean, I think if it's a project and they're gonna go forward with it,
Mhm.
it's reasonable to ask that. Say, you know, if you don't start it within this timeline, then you're back. And then, because like you said, somebody otherwise could just tie up all the land and
not do anything.
do anything or have the monopoly on it. But
Well, if you look kind of in the 89 and the operation and maintenance plans and kind of decommissioning plans, you'll see various checkpoints where they have to have a relationship with the county and have tabs on them.
Yeah, you know, we're reporting and verification, scheduling.
Well, again, I would probably suggest, you got the three options there and
Mhm.
it's kind of, it's up to you as far as what you're thinking as far as is an overlay feasible or is it the other option was to strengthen the conditional use language from the existing district or move it over to the development plan. If you're to do something with this overlay though, I would definitely suggest that the language be kind of focused in the way that we want with some of these added concepts, but brought into the development plan as part of justifying overlay.
I know that before when we talked about it, the overlay was appealing because it had so many sets of eyes on it. Had so many different
yeah, reviewed by
methods of
all three.
approval. Yeah, supervisors,
and-
board of adjustment and mission.
And then it can be conditions specific to that area.
Right.
You got to be aware that you can run into lots of redundancy too.
Mhm.
And you've got to have everything be practical and feasible. And many of these jurisdictions that do the overlay becomes the allowed use inside of, so the overlay is project specific. So I've tried to find an area where you put a conditional use inside and double it up, but it seems that the practicality and feasibility of you go to this permit criteria, you go to this permit criteria, and it becomes very cumbersome as far as running through the process. And those other jurisdictions like Lynn, once you get through the grinder, going through the zoning commission, approving the board of supervisors, approving the overlay, that would ultimately authorize the use. So the conditional use would not be a part of that. So the overlay would basically authorize that use. And so, yes, you would still have a level of public involvement, but that would likely remove the board of adjustment. I'm just not seeing a clear pathway to doing a conditional use after you approve an overlay. I think that that's probably way too much from what I've read in some of the literature, and I haven't found a jurisdiction to hold up, because I originally was thinking, yeah, we could probably do a real trim overlay district, but then how do you divide the responsibilities between the Board of Adjustment and from the Board of Supervisors? If the Board of Supervisors feel that this is good in this way, and then the Board of Adjustment, we could run into a problem between both boards. And so an overlay is truly designed for the zoning commission and the Board of Supervisors to kind of come to a conclusion on whether that fits or not. And so I think ultimately what would happen is you would have a public hearing, scrutiny full level at the zoning commission level. Then that this would be brought up to the 3 public hearings at the Board of Supervisors level. So you would be at the 4 for sure on that. Or we could put another mechanism in there if you wanted to have a multiple zoning commission ones. But as far as pulling the Board of Adjustment in, I think that they might actually be out of the equation as far as the overlay district. But if you were to continue with our current policy, the other proposal in here, if the community is all set on it being in industrial areas and not on the ag land, I think it would make sense to have the zoning commission's Board of Adjustment continue to do the permitting with added features if it's specific to industrial. So that's where all of these concepts and proposals gets kind of cumbersome.
Yeah, confusing. Mhm. So that takes kind of the interesting part of why we like the overlay away, is that it had an extra set of eyes on it. Does that change?
Well, it's, I mean, but I understand what you're saying.
Mhm.
Just means overlays got to make sure everything's addressed, and at that point, once they.
It doesn't make it's a major change as far as whether you think that's an effective
How
method.
does that allow, if the overlay, you basically have your conditions with the overlay, either they meet them or they don't, versus the conditional use site specific, where maybe this is a little bit different than this other one because it's a different piece of property. So there was some conditions you had to apply here that didn't apply here. How do you accomplish that with overlay, or you
I
just?
think it could be very similar as far as the application process of scrutinizing the neighborhood and having the ability for the supervisors to impose conditions that are recommended.
So those recommendations could still come from the zoning board then and be applied to that overlay district differently than maybe a different overlay district that was.
Yeah, and if you all have a process, and we'll use the conditional use for an example, you find a deficiency or something that could be improved or meet the requirement based on the condition. We usually have a condition for the purpose of bringing an application up to par to be compatible with the area. And so the zoning commission identifies anything that they find that might be needing a condition, worthy of a condition, and present that in the ultimate final report to the Board of Supervisors. You are all doing an investigation for the Board of Supervisors and a recommendation capacity to tell them that here is the determination of this commission. We feel that this is suitable for this area. However, this item needs to be addressed, this item needs to be addressed, and then they can have the ability to impose
The
that.
ability is still there. It's just that you don't have that, the Board of Adjustment.
They basically are doing the work of the Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
I think one way to address that too, in the overlay proposal, is to add the requirement for site plan review and approval at P and Z, at planning level and the Board of Supervisors. So not only would you have to meet those criteria, that next level, not going to the conditional use permit, would be through site plan review. And so this body could actually review a site plan, make the additional conditions as they see fit, depending on the neighborhood, the location, the other factors that come into play, and also a public comment. You're going to get public comment on each one of these that are going to be different, right? And so that site plan would then follow the overlay throughout the process.
Yeah.
And you
And
wouldn't be
become-
dealing with the legality of treating one different than the other because you.
Ultimately, we could have them sign off and do the building permit too.
Mhm.
And ultimately put it up as a board item to really assure the public and confirm that this is where the project is at this point, and they would basically approve it through a vote. Basically, we could, yeah, have them be the permitting body for that as well.
So that was part of, being a conditional use, it gives you that much more latitude and flexibility with each application. That's the beauty of it. We don't want to lose that, so, yeah.
But I will get back to, and we're talking about this in theory, but we're still gonna have to have that grand
Yeah.
criteria.
Right, right.
What it is that will be the heart of a overlay district. What threshold do they have to meet?
So I included section 5.08 on page 55 in here, and that's just
Yeah.
utility scale solar energy systems conditional use, which is what the industrial.
Yeah, let me explain page 55 and forward.
Sorry, show up late,
No,
leave early.
no.
Page,
Thanks, Tom.
page 55 and forward, this is an amendment to keep the exact same process in the exact same area and keep the zoning commission, the board of adjustment permitting inside of general industrial.
Okay.
That was one of the options available, was that we've had concerns to strengthen the conditional use with further criteria that allows the commission and the board of adjustment to ensure that they do things such as impose decommissioning and various road use agreements, various other agreements, ensure that those get built in by enumeration.
Okay.
And so that's the rationale behind the utility solar scale conditional use.
Okay.
So that's separate from the overlay.
Okay,
So
that's what I.
that's another option for your recommendation.
Which is 76 is the utility scale energy system overlay districts, and then it goes into kind of a different format, but it covers a lot of the same types of things, and you had
The other thing.
red type in here.
The other thing, while I still have it up here, is inside of the overlay district, you'll see some references to battery systems too. And that's something that should be on the radar
Mhm.
in terms of maybe having as part of a recommendation. So whatever path you take on solar, you might want to consider that as far as facilitating the permitting of these batteries. So I would strongly suggest considering a form of that language as part of the recommendation, because we know if you're dealing with solar, you're going to very likely be dealing with batteries. So
Mhm.
Please forgive me for interrupting, but do you know what time you're gonna allow public questions?
When we're done discussing, I guess, or we can do it whenever. What do you guys want to do?
Like, you in a rush? Do you want to go now?
That'd be great. Yeah, I've
I
got,
think you
I've
should
got to
kind
be
of wind
someplace
it down
out
a
there.
little bit. So
Wind down? Are we ready to wind down?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, do we have more questions or something that's pressing? Okay, I just wanted to clarify that we had conditional language here, use language, and then we had the overlay language. You're not suggesting conditional use, the first part for just the industrial area, and then this part for
my
the overlay?
suggestion is that we carefully examine what the public has to say about the priorities on solar as far as the development plan. I think it's been very apparent throughout the course of the debate, and I think that the development plan needs to coincide with this. And so I think ultimately you could have multiple recommendations, possibly
Mhm.
routes that they could take, supervisors could take. And so I think that the input is imperative as far as potential areas. I think that we're of course being monitored and being watched by developers. And I encourage folks to contact staff to respond to our request for comments, because we need more information as far as what kind of county we want to be. And so development plan needs to be a key part of it. But I also think that you have the ability to strengthen the conditional use permit ordinance. The problem is if you do go for an overlay, how do you handle industrial in the future too?
That's
So
what I
are
was-
you gonna be left with a different set of policies for the industrial? And so we're gonna have to find a way to marry these two items together.
Because that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Are we having two different policies for two different? Yeah,
So,
okay.
so if you're doing an overlay and you're doing the other one, you're gonna have to have something that mirrors it, but it's suitable for the industrial area. If you're doing agricultural mitigation, you're probably not gonna worry about it so much on industrial land. So we've just gotta be able to keep everything prioritized and divided. So,
Okay.
yes, that's all I've got.
Easy? What did you
Sounds
say?
easy, yeah.
Okay, you may speak now.
Great.
Yes.
My name's Kim Alexander. I farm at Smithland. And I appreciate y'all's public service and doing this. You could not pay me to do your job. But I do appreciate what y'all are doing. And I just want to ask a couple questions, 2 or 3 questions, backing way up to the beginning on the fundamentals of this thing. And it was very hard to hear. I want to say that. I appreciate the gentleman in the red shirt. I could generally hear him, but the rest of you, it was tough. But so if I ask something that's already been answered, please forgive me. So a gentleman said something about a meeting with the Department of Ag and the Department of Energy, and they were assessing communities and how they're coming along with their setting up the framework for this whole green energy deal. Is that?
Yeah, basically, as you all know, there's been some federal initiatives as far as this renewable energy. A lot of the literature talks about the closing of the coal plant or plants and the replacement energy. And one of the things that occurred at this meeting was they wanted to kind of understand concerns that we may have had from the local level about the implementation of solar in the communities. And this isn't entirely a fresh, brand new thing. It's been out there for years, but they want to know generally what some of the challenges are, whether it's taking ag land out of commission and
Right.
placement, et cetera.
I understand it. So this is first and foremost a top-down government intervention. Is that accurate?
I can't really directly say that as far as saying that
That's
we know that there's information out there that there's a compelling interest in renewables for a future energy policy.
especially from the government, right? And so the other question, so this is not free market enterprise. If I understood correctly, again, I apologize for being so hard of hearing. This is not free market, grassroots demand for this. This is another top-down government intervention in rural America, rural Iowa. And so I would submit to you all the challenge and the difficulty. And again, I appreciate what y'all are doing. You could not pay me to do your job. So I appreciate y'all doing this. I would submit to you that the biggest part of the challenge is trying to create something that there is no grassroots demand for. It is the problem that we can't make enough energy from coal or natural gas? No. The problem is Big Brother government doesn't want us to have that option anymore. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a recipe for disaster. We're seeing these electric cars. I read it, a headline today. These electric cars in Chicago or where these big cities, they are frozen robots. Free market demand will take care of what we need, not top-down government boondoggles paid for with non-existent tax money because they're just printing the stuff. So again, I appreciate what y'all are trying to do, but we do not need this. There is no demand, grassroots demand for it. It is government boondoggle and government, to quote that great Western philosopher, I think his name was Ringo Starr. He said, everything government touches turns to crap. And that's what's going to happen, folks, if you try to thread the needle for Big Brother. So any questions for me?
No, thank you very much.
Great, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Check.
Do we have anyone? What?
Sorry, I took them.
No, no, no. You can say whatever you want, whenever you want. You know that. Anyone else from the public want to comment? Artie?
Marty George, city, Sioux City. First man, I think I'm city planner for the city, or senior planner, so we, and it goes a little bit about this, and we just wanted to listen for a while, and maybe make a few comments on behalf of the city. He's the expert planner, so I do economic and community development, so, but, I'll just start off, and then Chris can add technical comments, I guess, but I do want to say thank you for the work you're doing. Obviously, I'm impressed by how much detail and depth you've gone into here for this, reading some of the materials and wow, it's really been a lot of time studying this, so I know a whole lot more about it than I do, sure. But if I understand correctly, the current process is in Woodbury County has allowed these large solar systems as a conditional use in industrial areas. Looking at ag, and you're looking at the whole thing, you know, so. And from the standpoint of the city of Sioux City, our concern is that, and it's been brought up here a couple of times, 2 mile area around the city is usually where you have some interest in jurisdiction in some areas. Chris can explain, but not in zoning. We have some things, subdivisions and so on. And we have been working very hard. And actually want to say, we don't necessarily, we're concerned with just having it in industrial areas as well. And I say that because in the south, what we call the Southwood area, which is the area south of the airport, Fort Neal, city has actually worked with the county, and we put a lot of infrastructure, a lot of investment in the area. We're not growing like Des Moines or something, but we have steady growth. And that's an area we identified for industrial growth. And we put a lot of investment into the water plants and streets and water and sewer utilities and so on. And our concern is not necessarily the case, but it's possible that if you have 1,000 acres or hundreds of acres going to solar, that will lose the opportunity for other types of industrial growth. I don't want to say things I'm not know a lot about, but I don't think there's a lot of jobs. And we're trying to build a factory or a facility of some kind that employs hundreds or thousands of people, and that's hard to do. It doesn't happen overnight, but we've been diligently trying to have land available for that. I would also mention that the city of Sioux City, Sergeant Bluff, and Woodbury County have gone in on the interchange, which has taken several years to study and is now under design with the cooperation of the IFDOT, right in that same area, which we think will lead to more industrial growth. And we have some concern that if a lot of that area went to large solar farms or large solar system arrays, or I'm not even sure the right terminology, but that might sort of impact what we think is going to be a tremendous opportunity, not only for Sioux City, but for the Woodbury County and the whole region to see some significant growth. And so that when you say industrial, it asks you to consider different types of industrial growth. Energy production is one type, but a lot of other kinds of industrial growth is kind of the, I guess, what we're most concerned about. So, and I also share some concern over the use of agricultural land. Sioux City we're a larger city, but we're driven by agriculture. I mean, that drives our economy here. Rich rich agricultural land, lots of livestock, a lot of businesses, industries in Sioux City, and majority, I think, are food production, food related. And so we have some concern too, just in general about taking really high quality farmland or something that maybe the solar thing is not the highest best use of that land. So again, I'll let Chris comment a little bit on something maybe more technical things, but I appreciate your consideration of this and take into account not just Sioux City, but the other cities in Woodbury County and how they may, we would like to be impacted some of the residential areas too. We've had, again, we're not growing as fast as Waukee or Ankeny or something, but we do have some good residential growth occurring around the outskirts of Sioux City. We'd like that to continue. That's what we're that. We think without more housing, you don't have people and that you don't have the job creation. So I think it's vital to our whole region.
I think our main concern would be with the utility size, that within 2 miles of a city's jurisdiction, that it's either those would be prohibited, such like the wind turbine. And I know that was noted in your write-up as well. There's also some comment about a 5 mile, or at least a FAA review within a certain distance of the airport. We're working with our airport to get what their language would be on that, or what their proposal. They didn't know if the 5 mile was really necessary, just along with FAA. One thing that we do allow it, wind or solar energy in Sioux City as an accessory. So that's something that obviously we would be in favor of, if that's something you guys want to continue. I'm not sure how your ordinance addresses that currently as an accessory use, or just the utility scale principal use within that 2 miles is our major concern. We do appreciate the larger notification here as well. The one currently is about just a little over a mile outside Sioux City, so we weren't aware that that one was proposed, but that increased notification would be helpful as well.
Yeah, on the airport deal, we have talked to Mike Collette, our airport director, Chris has been talking to me. Yeah, we're gonna submit a letter to you. Is that okay? It'll probably be signed by the mayor. He's been interested in this, asked us to look into it. So, we want to make sure we express the concern about the airport because within a certain distance of runways, it can affect planes. Probably not big planes, but smaller ones. Pilot can be affected by. There are some rules there where we'll get those to you or into what their concerns more specifically is.
Mhm.
There are some approvals that FAA must have over or this type that cause issues with pilots.
I think that was with the Mid-American. We spent a lot of time evaluating that information and making sure that was accurate. And we did have the FAA.
Determination, yeah.
Yeah, we had their blessings. Yeah, so we wouldn't have moved forward on it if we hadn't. So that's a big issue.
To answer your question, Chris, and Dan, can you clarify, this does not impact any accessory use or personal use of solar, right? So anyone that's currently or plans to, or has pending applications to energize their personal property with solar, this is not directed towards that use, correct?
Yeah, this, just for the record, this debate ended up split in August. We had a original proposal that went through that treated this as a conditional use originally on ag land. And we addressed the accessory solar. In fact, we kind of, we were more restrictive than Sioux City on accessory. We had it as a conditional use permit and you have it as a permitted accessory. And we went back and we amended our ordinance to have the same designation as Sioux City has. We did put some language in there for limited net metering opportunities because the way when we ran it through the county attorney's office, we wanted to make sure that you could not convert an accessory situation into a utility situation. So it ended up based on the definition. And so we do have permitted accessory use if somebody put one in the house or else in Sioux City at this point.
I guess from our stance, we would be only really concerned with the utility scale
Mhm.
within that 2 miles. If there were accessories within the 2 mile, we would have a concern.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mhm. Anyone else?
I've got a couple of questions. I did do Linham Park in eastern Woodbury County. I did Cherokee as well. Really curious why or if you guys discussed just expanding the general industrial to accommodate these industrial scale solar arrays, or whatever you want to call them. I mean, if we just had more room south side, well, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but I'm a farmer out in the county and I'm not a big fan of windmills, and I wasn't a big fan of solar either. But it seems to me like the best way to accommodate all of this stuff would be to keep it within an industrial zone area. That would be a simple thing. Now, I understand that there's gonna be people down there within that industrial zone that probably don't want to be zoned industrial. But the way it sounded, even the farmers that are already there, that may actually increase the value of the land. What he was talking about earlier. So why don't we just consider increasing the size of the industrial down there to accommodate solar, where we already know that transmission lines are there? And leave the rest of us alone.
I think one of the things that had come up in our discussions too was that because when you change that zoning to industrial, there's a lot of other things that can happen in that industrial area, not just solar.
No, that's right.
But there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily as well compatible as they might be the farther you get away from that industrial area that we have right now. I mean, we look at it, when we have growth and we see that that's need, that definitely happen. But right now, well, what are some of the examples, Dan, that we have that go in industrial zones that may not be a priority?
Construction contractor yards, borrow pits, all sorts of heavy.
Like
intense-
petroleum storage, you know,
Oh, but don't we have room in Pinch County? I don't know, it sounded like there's about 11,000 acres.
11,000 acres now currently
Now currently it's all west of the interstate.
of the interstate.
Is there more farmland? Just because that's less populated and being away from Southern, don't we have more ground within Woodbury County? Be out of sight, out of mind.
To the south and Highway 75,
The,
there's a map.
yeah, we got our maps.
That's why.
I have my paper clip on it. Maybe I can find it before you
You,
can.
you turned right to it before.
I did. There it is, right there. Which one would you like? Existing?
They both were.
Either one?
This is tough to see. But the green area is predominantly all the ag land.
This is what's general industrial right now.
Actually, it's a purple. That's south of the airport there.
Okay, I see, good, yeah. And so this area right here would still be available. And it's west of the interstate, it would be
Yeah.
delineated by the interstate or whatever.
Well,
And it's primarily agricultural land.
the plan right now has historically referenced that it's open space or recreational. Under the,
Is that the green stuff?
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
all,
it's kind of,
that's all Browns Lake. Yeah.
yeah, so conservation areas and all those things have been kept in mind for that type of zoning designation.
And so we're trying to preserve the ground down here and keep it away from industrial.
It appears so, yes.
That's what they're trying to, I'm from right here. Like I said, I've got farm ground here and down here and whatnot. And I've got farm grounds right within that green area that the conservation board keeps trying to buy from me.
Okay.
And they'll never get it.
Makes sense with that designation.
I better hide my jacket.
But it just seems to me that it would be best to keep industrial. That's really my point.
And just, again, that's definitely a good development plan discussion. for
Right,
sure.
absolutely. Yep. I'm sure we'll play that again too.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else?
Well, I wasn't prepared to talk tonight. I didn't realize we could say anything because last time we had work session, it didn't allow people to say things, but I know there's a form in there. I believe my son submitted, as talked about property values.
Mhm.
And it said overall, if you consider the whole United States, putting in the solar facility doesn't affect your value of your property. But there were three, and that was considering if you put it around urban centers on the east and west coast, it didn't affect anything. But they said there were three criteria that if you had, it would decrease your property values 5%. And that was and I'm not looking at it right now, I don't remember exactly. But it was the size of the project that was going to be put in. And if it was in a rural setting. And there was one more, and I don't remember if it was just in the Midwest, I don't remember what the third one was, but it's on there somewhere. And then it says it'll decrease your property values. And I appreciate Mr. Alexander when he said this has not been pushed by anybody who says, hey, we're not getting enough energy. She looked up something on her phone, you're gonna save $15 a month by ruining all this ag land, put in solar. It's very inefficient. And this has just been pushed by people who have an economic, who have a money incentive to do this. And there weren't those of us in the ag community that said, hey, we want our ag land taken away so we can have solar. And I just think it's really ironic that you want to take away ag preservation land. So the word preservation means you need to save it. And I think the main, one of the main treasures of our county is the people. And we don't chase away the people that want to live out in the county. And people don't want to live by these big solar things. And I have a vested interest because they want to put this down in my area where I live. And I love the country. I love to see the country. And I also have a question. You talk about, well, these things could have ag uses. Now, if they sign a lease with the company, and I understand, I found out, you could look online on things. This company that, the big one they want to sign up with, if you look up their headquarters, it's a lawyer's office in Ohio somewhere. This isn't even like a business, you know, whatever. And, now I forgot where it is. Sorry.
Ag uses, something about ag uses.
Oh, yes, if you have ag uses, so if you're signing an agreement with a company, they're in charge of what's gonna go on. The farmer is not gonna say, oh, I signed this with you, you know, several years ago, I suddenly want to make sure that it has an ag purpose. Well, that person's not in charge of it anymore. But my understanding is when you sign an agreement with the company, they're the person that's in charge of it. So I think all this discussion about, well, it's gonna fit with ag and the farmer wants to have it ag, it's not the farmer that's gonna decide these things. It's that company that they've signed an agreement with, unless I'm misunderstand this, but I don't see how the farmer has any say once you've signed an agreement with the company.
I don't have firsthand experience, but my thought is that because of the contracts that they use, a lot of these issues will be addressed in those contracts, but we can't control those. The only way we can control it with what we do with ag. I mean, what we do with our zoning ordinances. I mean, that's
But
all
a
we
lot
can
of
do.
Contract
These contracts are
they're
held
not contracts, there's another name.
outside of us.
They've already been
Options,
signed.
options.
Options have
Yeah.
already been signed.
Yeah.
And so I have a concern about this discussion about, well, it fits with ag because we're gonna do this. Well, you know, these companies don't live here. They don't, you know, they don't have a concern with how our county turns out. So that's my on the spot 2 cents, so sorry.
Thank you. And you're Mrs. Whitman.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm Elizabeth Whitman.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Anyone else?
Greg Yoakum. Just wanted to, the old saying, location. There's purposes for, why they didn't go to general industrial. It's the transmission lines, if the infrastructure's there. It's already there for them to use transmission lines. General industrial does not have any transmission lines up in that area. That would double the cost. It makes it not feasible for them to be in general industrial. The comment that one of you said that, you know, general industrial, we don't have to worry about it because it's already zoned general industrial. You can still farm the general industrial. I guess I'm farming ground in the general industrial, but I also have ag preservation ground. I would much rather have a conditional use or the overlay for that than have, you know, ground in the, you know, not close to the highways, the interstates and all that being deemed general industrial for a project. You know, your spots, I don't see where that would be very detrimental, because the ag preservation is good because when the leases are up and they decommission it and take everything out, it goes back to farming. You're not out anything, whereas if it goes to general industrial, then
Always general industrial.
it's stuck there, and, you know, a concrete plant, you know, warehouse can go up, and there's nothing that anybody in the country can do. And you know, I think if, you know, looking at, you know, going with the utility scales, the scorecard, you know, that is something, if you go with an overlay or something using that, which is, it's designed for the preservation and incentives. It gives you lots of options and lots of ways for them to score how these projects are cited. Because, you know, obviously when it's done, it goes back to the ag production. You know, and I think Lynn County, doesn't Lynn County use the scorecard?
Where we got that example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you for everything you guys do.
Thank
because
you.
Like Kevin said, it's tough, Jeff.
But we appreciate your participation and your comments and your thoughts and your ideas, because it makes us think maybe outside the box too. We haven't thought about it. You know, it hasn't come up. So if you don't say something, we don't know. Your participation is greatly appreciated. Surely. Yeah. Anyone else?
Can I speak?
Who is speaking?
Okay, this is Leo Yoakum, 1691 250th Street at Salix. And I kind of want to talk about farmland, the history, what we had in Woodbury County. And I'm going to back up to what we had in Woodbury County farm economy of the 70s. We had a county that had a robust livestock industry. It was supported in every small town in the county had a co-op elevator. Farm machinery dealers, livestock equipment dealers, fuel distributors, local veterinary services, just to name a few. This all fed into Sioux City, and that area had the major livestock yards, had 5 or 6 slaughterhouses, and it also brought along with it a tremendous amount of support businesses. Now, when the farm crisis of the 80s hit, very few of these livestock producers in the county survived. I know because I lived it. And at that time, I was president of the Woodbury County Pork Producers. Our producer and associate membership went from over 300 members to under 30 in just 3 years. That's how fast and furious people were losing money. As a result of that, we had some officials in Woodbury County and Sioux City that were really on the ball. And today we have to applaud our county and city leaders in the 80s and right up to our present time for their insight, their proactive response to recruiting and attracting new businesses to offset the loss of the agricultural revenue. I want to share, I have some facts here from the Food and Agricultural Industry Economic Impact Study. And this study is put on by the United States Department of Energy along with the Food and Agricultural Department. And these facts are considered in Congress. They've got them now, and it's considered for the new Farm Bill. And I'm going to just touch on just 3 things. This stretches out over every county in the United States. It's also broken down by the state, each county. And I took Iowa, all 99 states, but I just separated out Woodbury, Plymouth, and Sioux, mainly because Plymouth and Sioux County was brought up as being strong ag, just like Woodbury. The difference is, I want to take a look at ag jobs. Woodbury has, in 2023, this is 2023, had 348 direct ag jobs. Plymouth County had 1,572 ag jobs. Sioux County had 3,000 ag jobs. Woodbury County ranked 85 out of 99 counties in the ag jobs department, ag wages. Woodbury County, 12,932,000. Plymouth County, 70,000, 283,000. Sioux County, 170. I got to back up. 12,932,000 for Woodbury. For Plymouth, 70,283,000. Sioux County, 176,495,000. Compare that. Sioux County had 176 million to Woodbury's 12 million in ag wages. Ag output. This is money coming from all of the ag area, that's hogs, cattle, swine, sheep, dairy, and crops. Plymouth County had, Woodbury County had 99,197,000. Plymouth County had 933 million, 10 times the amount. Sioux County had 1,730,327,000. Now to close this impact study also showed that Woodbury County ranked real high, very high in the top 5% in manufacturing jobs and wholesale jobs in the state. That's direct correlation to the leadership we had with the city officials and the county officials that saw how ag was falling through no fault of its own, but just through the ag economy. It was tough. Farmers went broke. Woodbury County needs industry, so keep that Southbridge area for industry open. We also need other ways in the county, in the ag economy, in the ag preservation area to bolster that. We can bolster that with renewable energy, with utility solar. It'll fit well. We may be bringing agrivoltaics right into this. It's a new one. It's coming on, but the tax revenue coming in, the extra jobs that are going to be coming in from that on a normal basis after it's in operation, there's going to be 8 very high paying jobs, and there's going to be related businesses that are going to have to help to maintain the grass, maintain the equipment, maintain the fences. It's going to be a plus for the economy. It's clean, it's efficient, and it's very good for the environment. I think the renewable energy overlay should be considered, and I think there's contracts out there that are very solid, and I know you want to know where it's at, but I know that once it's listed where it's at, it's a commitment. You can't do anything about it once it's a commitment. Just like somebody wanted to have a timeline on it. If all of a sudden that company is in and has a contract going and they're ready to build it, and all of a sudden we get hit with something similar to COVID, then all of a sudden you got to back up and you lose everything. So we need, yes, put stuff in there that's reasonable. And I think we can have a very good, I think utility solar can be very, very good for the community. It's safe. And I think it will just be good in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Commissioners? No? Going once? Going twice? All right. I think that is going to conclude our work session. Got all your notes?
Yeah.
Okay. Next item on the agenda then is public comment on matters not on the agenda. I didn't hear anything from before, so I'm assuming we don't have anything this time. So we'll move on to commissioners' comments or inquiries, which is number 7. Anything, commissioners? Thank you. No?
I
Jeff?
appreciate the feedback and look forward to next week's meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. And then staff update, number 8.
Staff update, just want to welcome Jeff, of course, to the commission. Don and I were kind of talking the other day about, we run into scenarios throughout the year. I think it's Memorial Day. I think sometimes we have a conflict on our meeting date, and we usually kind of decide a month out before. I think we don't have to decide tonight, but I think it's always good to have an alternative date or something if we get an application that comes in, so that we can facilitate any potential business that we might have to do in the month of May. So that's just something to kind of think about. I think, have we done a week later, or have we done a day later? Do you
It seemed like
recall?
It was like a day later, wasn't it?
Yeah, because we don't want
Tuesday. You don't want it to go into the next month.
to, worth the,
But we also don't
Board
want to go on the
adjustment.
supervisor.
Advisor's night too,
Right.
so was it
So I
Wednesday?
think, I think I've experienced it being a week later before. So,
You might have to look it up.
but I think it's something for all of you to kind of think about, because I know a lot of schedules are definitely important, but
Vacation.
yeah, so, but it's key that we can still, even though a holiday happens, that we can still have a agenda item. Somebody has an application.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely. Okay.
but other than that, we will have a public hearing on Monday, 5:00 PM in this room. We'll probably return up there, for the, public hearing comments. It'll be for solar again and the development plan, all beginning at 5:00 PM, those 2 items. That's all I've got.
Perfect. All right. And with that, the last item on the agenda is adjournment, which I adjourn our meeting for the evening.
thank
You
you.
don't even have to make a motion.
All
I'll
right,
just do
my
it.
work is done.
Thank you all
Thank you.
for being here tonight, for your participation. I appreciate that.